For historical context and more information, see the description below.
There are two groups of crosses. The crosses for which we volunteer and those that are forced upon us. Some would say that the first is the only one that is worthy of the name, that this is the cross in its holier sense. Unless one has volunteered to bear it, it really should not have the name at all. Jesus in one place said, "No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself." It was a conscious choice. He had the privilege of refusing to bear it. I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd giveth his life for his sheep. Christ saw a task to be done, and he volunteered to do that regardless of the cross. There's something special about it, something special about these things in life which we pick out and we say that we are going to bear the weight of them, regardless of how heavy that burden may be. It demands the kind of spirit that was in the Christ, and it is the kind of thing that is constantly reminding the Christian that he does not live unto himself alone. Probably here has been one of the faults of the Christian church through many of its centuries of existence. It has tried to lay upon people consciousness of their own sin. It has talked to them in terms of salvation for themselves. It has talked to them about escaping hell and being saved to heaven, but there's something very selfish about it. And the appeal through many of the old evangelistic campaigns has been just that. Are you saved? And yet there's something about this cross for which one volunteers, which leads one beyond himself and even brings him to the place where he looks upon his salvation as a kind of byproduct of something that he has done beyond himself. The peace of the world is his problem. The slums of the world are his problem. The vice, the drug traffics of the world are his problem. The spiritually and the physically hungry are his problem. Thousands of missionaries, millions of Christians through history have volunteered just like this. They have looked upon the cross of Christ and they have been led to say with Catherine Mansfield, I must put my agony into something. I must change it. In other words, they have not been thinking just in terms of what salvation is going to mean to them. They're not thinking only in terms of a suffering that comes to their spirit because of a sin that they know exists there. But they're thinking in terms of taking this spirit that God has given to them and putting it into something. Giving themselves. Volunteering themselves. Taking a cross on behalf of others in the hope that something good will be changed in the world. So the old hymn says, were the whole realm of nature mine, that were a present far too small, love so amazing, so divine, demands my life, my soul, my all. And they volunteer. But there's another cross, and that's the one that's forced upon us, and there are those who say that this really demands more of us than the other. At the beginning, it may not appear to merit the high consideration of the first, but it can become a very holy thing. Those burdened, called upon to bear something in the choosing of which they had no part, Jesus said in another place, the Son of Man must suffer. Something imposed upon him which he must do. And there are many people who know just what he was talking about. They have been called upon to suffer. Surely Simon the Cyrenian, who appeared in the last verse of the second lesson this morning, is an example. We do not know whether he had purposely gone to see the procession or not. It may be that he had just been caught up in it. Many times this happens in life. We go to see a parade or we go to watch a kind of an uprising, and the first thing we know, we're enveloped by the whole business. But whichever it was, he was there. And it's very safe to assume that he had had no intention whatsoever of being one of the main characters. There were 3 men bearing crosses. 2 of them evidently hardened criminals. The crowd was accustomed to see such. As a consequence, there was very little sympathy for them. But the 3rd man looked as if he had more than suffered a crucifixion already. The cross was not really a very heavy thing. Normally, it was not too heavy for a man to bear up the hill by himself. But this poor fellow was so weak, and his hands trembled as he clutched it, and his feet stumbled, and he fell, aching and bruised under the load. He had been through such a terrible night. There had been that long spiritual and mental suffering in the garden. There had been the trials, the mockings, the torture. There was that cruel crown of thorns which was still upon his head and eating into his flesh. Small wonder that he was shrinking beneath the burden. No, it wasn't usual for one man to be called upon to bear the cross of another. Because, you see, a part of the disgrace of the cross was to have to carry it in public. But these soldiers knew what this man had borne already. They knew he just wasn't up to it. And so they looked about for help. And they saw Simon, and they laid the cross on him and told him that he must bear it. Probably the furthest thing from his mind. And through no choice of his own, he went up the hill of Calvary with his inescapable cross. We live in a world where it happens very frequently. Remember that quote from one of George Eliot's novels? Because it said he tried to slip away from everything that was unpleasant, cared for nothing as much as his own safety. He came at last to commit some of the basest deeds, such as making men infamous. He denied his father and he left him in misery. He betrayed every trust that was reposed in him that he might keep himself safe and get rich and prosperous. Yet calamity overtook him. That last sentence, of course, is the important one in the whole lot. Calamity overtook him. Impossible to look about at one's friends, one's neighbors, one's city, And to say that because he lived a certain type of exemplary life, to say that because certain things were very dear to him in all of his existence, that because of this he went through life without having any great trouble, it just isn't that isn't true. We know that regardless of the lives that one lives, that the rain falls on the just and on the unjust, and sooner or later calamity overtakes. It does. Life seems to be going along very well when suddenly a severe illness strikes us and we're told to carry the burden of it. There's Calvary, there's the hill, here's the burden, go. The young man just getting started in life and he has a bad automobile accident. His spine is hurt, will never again be quite right. And in his youth he's told, there's Calvary, probably another 60 years of it. Here's the cross, bear the burden of it. Or death comes into one's home. Death comes to one who has meant more to the family than any other. And the family is told, bear the burden of that. Yes, there are crosses of circumstances. Crosses that are as unmistakable and inescapable as the sunrise or the sunset. And there's nothing holy about them. There's nothing holy about a cross. There's nothing holy about a burden. If you think there is, try to tell yourself so the next time you have a toothache. There's nothing holy about a burden or a cross. The holiness comes in what we do with the cross. There's nothing holy about the symbol. Previous, to the time of Jesus Christ, this was a symbol of disgrace, but it was what Christ did with the cross that made it a holy thing. We do have the choice, you see, of what we do with it. We don't always have the choice of our cross. We don't always have the choice as to whether it's going to be a broken leg or a broken arm or whether it is going to be some incurable disease. But once the cross has been laid upon us, we do have the choice of what we're going to do with it. And this determines whether there's going to be any holiness in it at all or not. And this is what separates the men from the boys. For the Christian, for instance, it's not just something to be accepted. Something shakes within me when I go to a home and somebody's been given a very heavy burden and the reaction is, well, this is my cross and I must bear it. That's not enough. The world is very ill, we see. We cannot comprehend it. But in one point we all agree, God won't and man can't mend it. Being common sense, it can't be true to take life as we find it, the pleasure to take pleasure in, the pain, try not to mind. That is just not the Christian approach, although it may be a part of the Christian approach. Much may be said for the philosophy in certain occasions, But it's just not a big enough philosophy on which to hang one's life. For such people, you see, are allowing life to run their lives. They're allowing circumstances to run their lives. Instead of saying, by the grace of God, I'm going to master life, so long as it remains. Nobody in the wide world ever found life worth living. He has to make it worth living. And when it does not respond to him from one angle, he always has to shift his position and strike it from another until it breaks open. God gave us a life which is filled with stone walls. It's filled with what appears to be at times just one-way streets. But he also gave us a world where something could be done with these things. Where did Pilgrim's Progress come from? From a man who might have surrendered to circumstances and decided that resistance to ideas in which he did not believe was completely futile, and he was going to throw in the entire sponge. But he didn't. And we got Pilgrim's Progress. The book which most authorities say is second only to the Bible. Dr. Ernest Tittle suffered 3 prolonged illnesses. He preached a good deal here in Pittsburgh. Illnesses that might have been unbearable crosses for them. Any one of them might have taken his life and said, this is the end, so far as you are concerned. But it didn't. And he came to the place where he said that the crosses that he had been called upon to bear meant more to his ministry than all the books he had ever read. Beethoven, deaf early in his career. At first he was discouraged. What a sorrowful life, he said, I now must live. Later on he said, I will seize fate by the throat. Most assuredly it shall not get me wholly down. The fact is, you see, that there are some who have accepted crosses as dead ends. Others have looked upon them as thoroughfares, and that's made the difference. I wonder what Simon said to his family that night. It must have been quite a story. Even at that time, he just interpreted that having taken part in a big parade. Can't you hear him relating of how he was just standing there watching things? And all of a sudden, this big soldier came along and grabbed him and said, here, take this fellow's cross. I wonder what was in his voice. I wonder if he even suspected for a moment how significant was this thing that just seemed to happen. And then I wonder what he said to that family months later, when the significance of what had taken place on that morning really began to break. I wonder what his inescapable cross meant to him. Some say that he was responsible for the establishment of Cyrene, one of the first Christian churches ever founded. In the letter to the Romans, Paul sent greetings to Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and his mother. And some say that reference was here being made to the son and to the wife of Simon. If such is true, Simon the Cyrenian made a thoroughfare out of his cross, didn't he? Now, of course, handling it isn't a very easy matter. We would better recognize that there has to be a lot of built-in strength if one's going to do it. Many years ago in Buffalo, I called on a dear lady who was over 90 years of age. She was sitting alone in the sun porch, looking off into space. I asked her what she thought about in such moments. She replied that her many years had enabled to store up many memories, and often she just sat and went back and talked with her memory. Well, it's a great thing to have memories of the right kind. Built-in resources, if you will, to call upon. What a picture of power Kipling gave to us. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. If you can trust yourself when all men doubt you and make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired of waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies. Or being hated, don't give way to hating. And yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. Yours is the earth and everything that's in it. What is more, you'll be a man, my son. But to become such a man demands a heap of doing. Any wonder that one young fellow read that verse and his immediate reaction was, but what if you can't? What if you can't? Be the kind of person Kipling was talking about demands a heap of doing. What if you can't? Maybe the way to it is best illustrated by Ernest Wall and what he had to say on the sign of the cross. First, he said, we make the letter I. That's the downward stroke. And it represents ourselves, our wishes, our ways, our interests, our ease, our comforts, our well-being, our grudges, our envies, our vanities, our selfishness, our self-preoccupations, and our self-consideration. That part of the cross we have too plainly in our lives. But to make the sign of the cross, he said, we first make the letter I and then we cross it out. Maybe what Kipling's talking about is completely impossible until we come to recognize that. Until we come to recognize that this is the sign of the cross, first making letter I and then crossing it out. A lot of discipline in what Kipling talked about. Keeping one's head when all about us are losing theirs. Waiting and not growing tired of waiting, and being lied about and not dealing in lies, and being hated and not giving way to hatred. But before God, it's the building of that kind of person that enables one to bear the inescapable cross. And it's the kind of thing that's lacking in so much of our society today. when we talk about all of the freedoms that we must have, and that you mustn't try to hold people down. Don't be too strong on your laws and your regulations. Don't be too strong on discipline. Before God, where in the Bible does it say that we can be permissive like that? I think this verse of Kipling should be tacked up on every campus in the country. For there is no man in this wide world who is as much a slave as the man who's trying to get along without discipline, who hasn't learned that there are some things in this world that he must obey. It's all very well to talk it through and to discuss it. I imagine Moses did it with his people. But then he went up into the mountain, and he came down from the mountain, and he said, "Thou shalt not." And from that time to this, nobody has been able to get through life without walking past Mount Sinai. But let's not forget that there's help from God in this thing. Goethe once said that the aim and the end of all religion is to help men to meet their inevitables. Maybe he was right. Maybe the great end of religion is to help us to handle what's about us. William Cooper would have said so. Everything was going against him. All of the joys of life seemed to be taken, and there was nothing but further loneliness and frustration. But he did have some religious resources. And one day, more out of despair than hope, he turned to the Bible. And he read about the grace of God, and he read about a cross, and something happened. And he gave to us a hymn that isn't sung very much today because people think it's too gruesome to be sung. Probably it is. There is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins, and sinners plunged beneath that flood lose all their guilty stains. But Cooper didn't mean it to be gruesome. He didn't mean it to be as we've interpreted it. He was saying that at the heart of things there's a Father heart. And the blood of Calvary speaks not only of purification through him, but of how much he cares what happens to us. And so he gave us the last verse of the hymn. When this poor, lisping, stammering tongue lies silent in the grave, then in a nobler, sweeter song, I'll sing the power to save. Nothing gruesome about that. Sometime in life, all of us are going to have to face inescapable crosses. One is the feeling that when Jesus said that he must suffer, he made of that mustness a glory. He took something that was cruel and ugly and horrible, and he changed it into a glory. I wonder if it's true that Simon saw that, and if Simon remembered it when there were other crosses to be borne. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
This morning's worship service emanated from Shadyside Presbyterian Church in Pittsburgh. Ministers of the church are the Reverend Dr. Howard C. Scharfe, the Reverend Dr. James R. Spear, and the Reverend J. Wayne Hanratty. Organist and choir director, Russell G. Wickman. Today's sermon by Dr. Scharfe was titled, The Inescapable Cross. Your comments on these services are invited. Listen next Sunday at 11 o'clock for the regular worship service from Shadyside Presbyterian Church, Amberson Avenue and Westminster Place in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.